Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. So I'll just kickstart the webinar off with some introductions. So TIE is a global non-profit, which is one of the largest organizations dedicated to fostering entrepreneurship in the world. One of the annual events that they host is the TIE Global Summit Delhi NCR. Now QGLUE, the design and innovation venture of QAI, has been working tirelessly for the last nearly 3 years to help create a culture of innovation and build a design culture in India. They've been evangelizing the use of design thinking and its principles to provide people with the tools necessary to innovate, ideate, empathize, and create. Now, TIE and QGLUE partnered 2 years ago in 2017 to create the TIE QGLUE Design-Led Entrepreneurship Awards, where they want to recognize, reward, and provide a platform to startups and entrepreneurs who were using design thinking and innovation in their work. Now, this year we have some amazing mentors with us from across the globe. And today we have with us Dean Myers all the way from New York. He's the co-designer and faculty of the American Management Association AMA since 2017 for the design thinking program and has over 20 years of experience in facilitation, coaching, and training people in design thinking and virtual thinking methods. Thank you so much, Dean, for being here with us today. And over to you.
Thank you. It's my great pleasure to share this time with you and hopefully share information. And I would hope also inspiration in following your own personal journeys in becoming design thinkers and applying it into your work and potentially into also just the way you function in the world in order to improve the quality of your own life as well as that of the people that you have contact with, either directly or through your products and services. I wanted to give you an idea rather than an entire course. So there's going to be quite a bit of information, and it may feel a little bit like you're coming from the fire hose, that I'm just giving you lots of ideas, and I hope that's okay. But I'll try to stay concise and move us through and get us to a point where you can ask some questions and I'll potentially answer, but I also hope to be able to interact with some of you possibly to mentor and help you on the journey of becoming design thinkers. The idea why I wanted to push this design-led and product-fed concept is because it is successful. It works. It works for small businesses. It works for large businesses. And it is the environment that is the most successful today in commerce and in services. One of the really important things to know is that only one thing comes first. That's the customer or the client. The business is not just customer facing, but it is all about serving people. So from the business side, the key performance indicators or the outcomes that matter are the ones that serve the client best. I want to tell you just a little bit about myself first. My motto is be brave and iterate. It comes out of this idea that design thinking is experimental in nature, that failure is really not the word to use when you're thinking about trying and testing things out. It's about experimenting and being playful and being curious and being inquisitive. And I've done that for many, many years. I started working in technology specifically all the way back for Apple before the Macintosh computer launched in 1983, and I had to experiment and learn how to teach people to use this new device with the new graphical interface with the mouse. And I'm sure many of you may have seen historic advertisements. And it was a whole new world for us. So I've moved through that environment. I've worked with government educational institutions, industry from the IT side of businesses, from startups through international conglomerates. I've taught agile teams for companies implementing a scaled agile framework and non-technical teams how to become design thinkers and work on improving their systems at work. So as I say, with this be brave and iterate iterate. I've tried to share this as an individual, as a professional, and as a mentor. Um, the latest personal accomplishment I want to share with you is that I've participated as one of over 50 authors in a book that was just released and is now being distributed called The World of Visual Facilitation. And I wrote 2 chapters for this book. One is about using visual methods, templates, to do design thinking, and then another on facilitating or working with people and teams by using play. So that might interest you as well. So I want to ask that you approach this webinar and design thinking with a couple of guiding principles. First, see the big picture. So I'll be happy to stop and clarify some of the topics or ideas I'm going to cover, but I could talk for hours about each of them, and we don't have the time for that. As I say, you can potentially contact me afterwards, but the point is I want you to get a bigger view because there will be things that will resonate with you and things that won't. The key phrase for keeping an open mind is yes and. So when you hear an idea that sounds new, different, or maybe impossible today, but with some creativity and a different outlook could trigger something even better, you can take that idea and say, well, yes, and. So this is a key factor in having a design thinking mindset. And you'll hear it called the art of the possible. And does that open up design thinking to go beyond creating products and services? Yes, and. More about the mindset. Because it works best in teams, that means that different people will have different viewpoints. So as this fellow here, he would tell you that the beach ball is red. But this person here, she might see it as yellow. Why? She just has a different perspective based on what she knows. So it's about keeping an open mind for other possibilities and other viewpoints as well. Here's one more thing that's very helpful in the rules of engagement. Because again, we're working in teams, we can somehow get stuck in the weeds. So I want to introduce this idea of GEPO, if you've not heard it before. And that's me writing on the screen, by the way. Good enough. Push on. The point being that you don't want to get stuck in the mire of trying to get to perfection. It is incremental. It is iterative. The actual practice of design thinking, which I like to call design doing, means that you're going to try and run small bets or small experiments and see how they do. And they won't be perfect. And they may need to be thrown away or modified. You might have to pivot. That's fine. Just keep focusing on delivering to the client. So here's what I'd like to try and accomplish with this webinar. I'm hoping that you will understand what is a design-led business, that you'll learn some of the guiding principles of design thinking, that you'll understand the way I do, why a multifunctional team is the most successful. I'll try and give you some statistical information that I've learned, why a business benefits from being design-led and customer-centric, and finally, why you need to cross communication gaps between development teams and the business units. There is no possibility for success if everybody isn't on the same page and has a strong sense of direction, purpose, and drive towards As I'll say it again, serving the client or the customer. So I've broken this into three parts. Design thinking puts people first, foremost, and always. That after you've done the thinking, you have to do the doing. And then part of the doing is you have customers and you have a business, but how do you know you're doing well enough to sustain your business? So I want to talk a little bit about the people first. Here's some ideas. These are actually 10 things that have been found from statistical analysis of different businesses, how design-led companies are winning the world. It's a strategic tool that becomes part of the company branded culture. Good design makes an emotional connection with the customers, so that differentiates the brand and the company. The design-led company focuses on improving the full customer experiences, not just the product. So other divisions besides development and design are engaged. A design-led company encourages everybody in the company to focus on the customer. And then that becomes a shared vision, which really creates meaningful work for people. The Design Management Institute says that design-driven companies have maintained a significant stock market advantage, and they outperform the S&P, the Standards & Poor's 500 in America, by an extraordinary 219% over the past 10 years. I was doing some research on what's happening in India, and the government has pushed for something called the India Stack and other ways of trying to assist the Indian economy to improve through design thinking by making technology much, much more accessible to many, many more people, and to make the wheels of commerce easier to operate in a technological environment. But in order to do that, you're going to have to employ design thinking methods. Users are willing to pay. I'm going to jump a little bit because you can read this on your own. I think that I want you to see that there is a 41% higher market share for design thinking led companies. And that's because of the first point that I brought up, that there is a stronger sense of loyalty and a sense that customers believe that design thinking based companies care about them. And then finally, design driven companies are able to adapt with the changing times and have global reach, which I'm hoping that all of you are thinking of doing it some way. You probably have seen, or I hope you've seen, this Venn diagram, because this is going to be a lot of the theoretical underpinning. When I talk about design thinking, it leads to innovation. So I'm almost using them in the same way, and I'll sort of jump in and out of them. But innovation or design thinking is both a process for designing products and services, but it's also a process for creating and operating your business. So a business that is design-led is going to look different than a business that is a traditional hierarchical organization. And it's going to count on three things that have to meet. Whether it's desirable, I'm going to start in the lower corner, I'm going to start here. Is it desirable? Do people actually want what you're going to try and create? Is it possible for you to be able to produce it based on your resources? And can it be done because the technology exists to carry it out? Now, for instance, I do training, and in the last couple of years, I've started to investigate doing training using AR, right, augmented reality, and virtual reality. That really wasn't feasible 6 years ago. The equipment was too cumbersome, and I'm still working on issues about how do I get an entire group to be working together in a virtual reality environment. So you really do need all of these three in order to be able to have innovation happen. McKinsey created a concept that there were three horizons of business operations growth. The first essentially only did small modifications, updates, and incremental improvements to sustain a well-established business. The second horizon, the company was saying, well, how are we going to continue to grow? So they used business analysts and product managers and marketers and creatives to look for market opportunities. So that would be a lateral product extension or perhaps new markets to reach. So in the States, in the US, it might have been how do we reach into the Latin American market, which was growing in the 60s and 70s to have more spendable income. How do we shift to produce products to do faster and better cleaning? So this was Procter & Gamble, for instance, who I've done some work with. Then you have the third type, the third horizon. It was a long distance away, and it's probably made most famous by Steve Jobs when he set up this freestanding operation that started fresh, independent of whatever Apple was doing, to create a completely new product. That was the Macintosh, which was delivered in 1984. And its innovation was it had a completely different approach to interaction with the device through the graphical user interface, the mouse. And then he did the same thing, setting up a group to go ahead and create the iPod music player. Then there was the iPhone, iTunes, which was a service basically, and mobile apps. Once again, these are innovations that aren't necessarily just a product or just a service. They start to become larger. They become systems. The Stanford D School came up with a formal way of approaching what we're calling design thinking, although it's been around. And they said we start by empathizing or understanding the people that we're trying to serve in a very deep, profound way. We concentrate on them by breaking down who they are, what they need to get done, or the jobs to get done. That's still around. Then we come up with ideas, and we allow our creativity to run wild. We do yes and thinking. If you notice, I'll point that out again. We prioritize them. Then we start to make very lightweight models. And then we test. And then this cycle will repeat itself over and over again. Sometimes it's cycles within cycles. Sometimes we have to actually start all the way back at the beginning because something's changed in the marketplace. So for instance, the marketplace will have changed of, let's say, young adolescents in the 10 years before between the iPod and the iPhone. Now there's a whole different way that they work and communicate or listen to music. And so we want to start a cycle again. Now we're going to get into a little bit of the thicker concepts. Some companies are going to have no business model, and some companies are going to be well established. And I'm going to ask here, this is the first time I'm going to ask you to participate, if you would. If you have, let's go back 1 second. And let's consider that we've got a Horizon 1 company, which is very often governments, for instance. They're very, very, very well established with their routines and patterns, and their job is to stay stable and only change in order to respond to changes that they have to respond to. Then you have the Horizon 2 type environment where you're charged with developing new products or changing or creating new systems that will allow the Horizon One type to move into a future state of growth. And then you have your visionaries. You can be completely independent, or you might have been broken out as an intrapreneur. And I wanted to just get an idea of which kind of business environment do you work in? I'm hoping that the poll is showing. And if you would please give me an idea. There we go. I see people I think look like they're starting to answer. Okay, we have 90% voted. And by the way, this is anonymous from my side. I can't see who voted, so you don't need to feel like I'm going to have any greater advantage. All right. So 56% of you are in well-established uh, enterprise or Horizon One companies. 22% of you are in Horizon Two. And then I have a breakout of 11% are intrapreneurships, innovation cells, or experimental divisions. And another 11% are startups, entrepreneurs, or in an incubator. So it's an interesting mix here because we have over half of you are pretty much coming out of Horizon One companies. So all of these concepts may be quite foreign, or at least in practice, maybe more theory than things that you're actually seeing happen in your work environments. While a quarter of you are probably starting to feel that there's the pressure to shift into doing more design thinking type of activity if you're not doing it already. And yet you still know that you have the resources and the fallback and also the responsibility to report to a well-established company that's trying to stay as close to its core mission and values as it has in many years. And then finally, the last quarter are full speed ahead, doing new things, uh, burning the road behind you and looking forward, I hope, bravely and iteratively. So I've closed up the poll so that I'm back on screen. So this is very interesting to know, and I'll try and see if I can modify as I go to help the Horizon One people potentially be inspired to bring these concepts back in to your environment, or you might wind up breaking out yourselves individually and becoming entrepreneurs after you see this. So having said that, let's move on ahead. I showed you this very quickly. Um, I'm going to show you that there are multiple approaches and multiple models for approaching design thinking. That it's that five hexagonal shaped model was one approach. But again, we're functioning in a real world with real businesses and real people. And also some people and some businesses would like to base themselves first looking at problems, while others will say, well, first I want to look at the market. So this was a very nice chart created by Gert Claes, and I'm going to share these different models and a little bit of some templates to show you how you can approach a design thinking practice. So the first, as I said, the first axis is from problem to market. And then the second axis is where you have no business model. You don't know what your company is going to look like. You've got a company or a business that's already working, and how are you going to fit design thinking into it? And as I say, that's closer to the Horizon 1 type company. If you were starting completely from scratch, you can use that five-step process with no problem, because you really have nothing to impede you. And that's a classic model. They call it the double diamond. This is a version I pulled out, thanks to Jasper of you. I pulled this one out because it has a lot of labeling on it to explain what's going on in here. And again, these visuals, you'll have access. Potentially, you should have access to this recording, and I can also make access to these templates for you to use at your leisure and experiment with setting up a design thinking practice. Let's look at the next one. Again, I don't want to dwell too long in it. I just want to give you this overview. Well, what happens if you've already got a business in operation to a certain degree, but you have the business in operation, but you have some freedom enough, more like we'll call it that Horizon 2. You have resources, and you have things in place, but you really need to employ some design thinking. So this was the inspiration from Eric Ries. He was building a software business in Silicon Valley. He had a terrible disaster. He spent a lot of time and money building something no one wanted. And he said, well, I'm going to start over. So I've already got a team in place, and I've got distribution and so on and so forth. But I've got to use a better way. I'm going to go and apply design thinking. He then wrote the book, and he called it The Lean Startup in 2008. And his model says you start with ideas, right? So this is where the people side come in. Pardon me. The people side come in. Then we jump and we make a lot of things very simply. And as we make the things, we build in a way to measure to see if it's viable. And this is the introduction of the minimum viable product, which you may have heard of. The MVP. And the idea behind the minimum viable product is the smallest version of the concept that can be consumed. So it can be a landing page inviting people to subscribe to a new magazine, right? And they look at the interest, there's your measuring part. And if there's enough, if it fits in that Venn diagram, get to that sweet spot of innovation, which they have learned by doing the measurement, then they go back to another build or a deeper cycle. And that's the loop. Google, again, this is a quote unquote a large, you would think it would be a Horizon 1 company, but it actually functions. Its strength is living in the 2 and 3 space, Horizon 2 and Horizon 3. And Google said, we are Google. We have all the business resources in place. Let's experiment as quickly and frequently as possible. And they came up with the design sprint. And the design sprint said, we have enough resources at hand. We have enough research. We have enough artists, designers that we can actually, by Wednesday, decide which of the ideas is worth testing. On Thursday, we have the resources, build a realistic prototype. On Friday, we can test with our target customers. And then, having learned what works and what doesn't, we can continue that iterative process. So this is the design sprint. And then for the very established Horizon 1 company, which is saying, well, design thinking looks good, but we have to keep our doors open. And part of that means we have to keep up, but we have to keep up first and foremost with what we already have. What can we do? And so one of the first things that they shifted over was doing something called Agile, which is again an iterative process. But instead of developing something over a long period of time, they adapted ideas from Lean and came up with these repetitive cycles, which they call scrums. It's a short cycle of development based on gathering criteria or requirements or jobs to be done, which are pulled from a backlog, and then they are small tasks. They're completed, right? Then they are tested and reviewed in a retrospective. And these cycles run approximately 2 to 3 weeks long and may only be dedicated to each scrum may only be dedicated to a small part of a very large project that would otherwise fail if it was built in long development phases before ever getting tested by real clients. So you can work in Agile all the way from the very first, you can actually do this Agile type work throughout as an actual way of producing. But it's interesting that Agile was a response to how to keep a Horizon 1 company able to survive. So I want to point out, again, looking at this Trinity, it needs to be feasible. Can we build it? Well, I'll start from the left. Do customers want it? I would say, can we build it is actually next. And then how do we make money? So design thinking, in order to be successful, has to shift. It has to focus on the client, yes, but it also has to be done with a company that is aligned completely from top to bottom with serving the client. So I want to show you a little bit of in-depth ideas of these are templates that you can use to engage in design thinking, and they can be used in all the horizons, and they can be used in a wide variety. I'd say all of those methods that I showed you, all of those 4: Lean Startup, the Stanford or the D School method, doing work in Agile. You can use these templates because what I'm going to show you is right now very, very much focused on understanding or developing empathy for the individual. This is a very, very good canvas. It's called a persona canvas. The idea of the persona is to create a model that you can relate to, in the sense that you can gain understanding of the hidden needs and wants and desires of a particular type of person. In other words, it seems very, very intriguing to say, well, we want to scale and we want to be able to serve everybody, but you have to start somewhere. you have to identify a particular set of needs. And so at the very first, let's grab one person, one archetype, and start to map what they look like, what their needs and wants are, what are the things that we could potentially address, what are the issues or problems that we can relieve, what can we build on to make them want to keep coming back. How can we create an emotional connection by checking off these boxes and making them feel like we have an understanding which forms a trusting relationship with them as a client. The next piece that we want to do is, it's one thing to see them captured in time in one moment as an entity, but I'm going to go back one and say, look at this idea behind opportunities. Well, opportunities don't happen 24/7. They come during different parts of the day, different environments, different needs happen. How do we focus? We focus by creating a customer journey. What's the story of what's going on? What are their needs at the moment? And this is usually talked about in Agile as jobs to be done. And you notice that within this canvas, we want to relate, once again, the emotional component. So what's a positive opportunity, or what's a problem that we want to resolve in a particular moment? I want you to see what one could look like. As messy as this is, and as simplistic as this is, here's another version. In other words, this is a very lightweight process. Here's another model, which again focuses on the same thing. What's the profile of our customer, and what value? Now I'm going to tighten in from the business side. What value are we bringing to them with what we want to create? Here's an actual template that you can use. And here's what one looks like when it's filled out. And you notice up at the top, there's the persona. There's the jobs to be done. And then looking over to the fit, these are I'm checking a mark with these are emotional connections to actual products. So why does a Model S, why does this have an emotional connection to this person? Because it's responding to this person's jobs to be done, pains, gains. Otherwise, it's just a car. Now, how do we deal with the mess? How do we deal with all of this stuff? It's rather straightforward. We create choices, we diverge, and we make choices. It's not enough to just go ahead and come up with many, many, many ideas. We actually have to start to do some investigation and decision making. It has to fit these criteria. And if it does fit those criteria and others, we start to come up with what we call a hypothesis. It's a really simple sentence of something we're going to experiment. We say, we believe that, and it could go back to the Tesla so-and-so, will solve that guy's needs specifically in order to be able to economically and environmentally safely get around. It will be enabled by a combination of artificial intelligence and high-end engineering. And what it will do is, and resulting in. For those of you who are strongly interested in how do we actually get more critical in our decision making, here's a particular tool. It's a canvas again on deciding which of the hypotheses are worth doing. Some because they have very low risk and they have a lot of value, just go ahead and do them. The ones that are the risky ones but have a high value, that's where we're hoping that real innovation will happen. In order to do all this, you can't do it alone. It's too hard, it has too many moving parts, and you can't do it fast enough by yourself. Not really. So, it is important to know who you're working with. I'm going to show you one example quickly of a type of profile to see how to get your team to work together and understand each other and deal with those issues of when you see the red side of that ball as opposed to the yellow side of the ball. This profile generates it's an online survey that you can take, and it takes just a few minutes. This is one. As I say, there are many types of these type of preference surveys, but the four types are those two, as he's called them, generators. The people who like to come up with ideas, the people who like to figure out what's going on and see if there's a new way of resolving a problem or inventing something new. The next group would be the conceptualizers. They like to say, well, these ideas are all very good, but we need to do deeper investigation, and perhaps we need to do more homework on it and get a better idea of both the major and the minor sides of it. Then we have the optimizer. Okay, I like your idea. I think it's got possibilities. Now I have to figure what are the small details and the small pieces that are going to make it function. And then finally, I like your idea. But once again, I've got to reach the bigger, broader world and figure out how to actually get it done. all involved in the innovation process. If you notice, it really takes an open, willing, trusting spirit to be able to make innovation happen when everybody has different preferences or different sides of the coin. And as an experiment, I'm going to ask you once again, I'm going to do another poll with you to get an idea of what's your preferred style of working. And there's no wrong answer, and I will I'll show you mine when I finish the poll. So what's your preferred style of working? Are you a generator, a conceptualizer, an optimizer, or an implementer? Okay, a little over half of you have voted. Anyone else care to vote? All right, let's take a look at the results. And it's very interesting that with 63% of the voting in, 100% of the respondents were conceptualizers, which on this type of a webinar is not surprising at all, because it's probably in the purview of someone who is a generator to have a concept about design thinking. And for an implementer, they probably want to have it all ready to be put in place without having to spend too much time thinking through the possibilities and the theories and so on and so forth. That's my guess anyway. And I will show you, as I promised, this is my results. And what does that mean? That means that when I am working on a design thinking team or an agile team, that I'm very much in the front end of the process. I'm doing the research work. I'm looking up what people's interests are. I'm interviewing people directly. I'm trying to get a deep understanding of where they're coming from. And I'm not fazed by the fact that there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of ambiguity in there. I kind of thrive in that environment. And I'm churning out ideas, suggestions, very loosely, very broadly. Then I may start to winnow down on a little bit of the areas that the conceptualizer side would cover. But I will start to really hand off when it's time for the developers and the salespeople and the product managers and so on and so forth, the people who are strongly standing on the implementation side. I'm further away from them. That's not to say that I have not functioned doing those tasks over the course of my working career. And this is important to note too, that these qualities are found in everybody as they engage in a design thinking environment and a design thinking process in using or working as a team. There will be a function or at least a sympathetic response of knowing what has to be done. What the preference is what this kind of test is about. So having said that, let's talk about this cross-functional team. If you are going to do a design sprint and you are in phase 1 of understanding, you have this lightning talks phase. Now, as I say, I'm a generator, but that doesn't mean that I have expertise or knowledge of all of these things, right? Here's a product vision, business goals. Well, I might know that. I'm personally strong in the voice of the user research, because that's my experience, which was based on the kind of work I like to do. Existing product audit and design evolution, that may be closer to one of the more refiner type personalities. Competitor audit, most likely, again, a refiner or an implementer who's been doing really strong research on that side of what's going on in the marketplace. Technology considerations and opportunities, again, that may be strongly done by an implementer rather than by a conceptualizer. But we all have to participate. This is a very common working canvas called the business model. Well, it's a variation on the business model canvas. It's the lean canvas. And this is a business's approach, wide approach to creating a new business. It's based in design thinking because, as you notice, we're talking about customers' problems, customer segments. So the people are there. Everybody points into the unique value proposition. These are the things you're going to potentially respond with. It's not even what the actual thing is yet. The solution, what's interesting is that the solution isn't even at the center. This is the response. So it may be a product or a service or a platform. Right? Can be any of these kinds of things. And then we have to deal with, remember, we talked about viable, feasible. It's all answered in here. So this is another possible tool for you to use, but it brings in the whole team. Everybody has to be working on this. So how do we get everybody on the same page? We have to break the silos. We have to speak a common language. Our KPIs have to be based on outcomes, not just the metrics. And I want to really emphasize this. Your outcomes have to be actionable, well-defined, timely, and impact the bottom line. And here's the trick. Your measurement was already written into your hypothesis. You are measuring that. So where it says enabled by, resulting in, also can be said, and we will know this is true when, sorry, help if I'd spell better. So if it were Tesla, the metric side, which is the measurement of we believe, of putting out the Tesla, and the reason for doing it is we know that this hypothesis is true when we know that we have sold 600 Teslas in 5 months and they're not returned, right? So I'm going to leave you in just a moment with this idea of how do we get on the same page, speaking the same language, especially in this age of using data science. And I want to offer this as a teaser. Again, this is a very deep, a very deeply written document, and it's Bill Schmarzo, who really talks about how data science really aligns with design thinking, particularly in predictive analytics and the current use of analytics with big data. And you notice what he's done here is he's lined up a data science practice that works with a design thinking company. I'll give you a moment to just look through it. And again, I invite you to, follow up on looking at this material afterwards, because there's a lot to it. But it is absolutely possible, and frankly, it's necessary to be successful. So, design, build, test, iterate, and scale together. Be brave and iterate. I'd like to, if we have just a few minutes and people don't mind staying on if they like, if you have questions and answers. And I want to remind you what I was attempting to do with this talk today. Are there any questions? You can type them in. I think I could turn mics on, but at least I can certainly respond to things that are typed. And while I do that, I want to give you a last poll because I want to measure how I did. Let's see. And again, this is anonymous, and this helps me to understand what I can do better if and when I do this webinar again. And again, I'm still open to taking questions. And I will offer that I will have my email on the next slide. And if there's something that popped up in your mind and you'd like to ask me afterwards, I would be very pleased to be able to respond. Great. I'll close out the poll in just about 20 seconds. And I want to thank you again for your time and your attention. So again, my name is Dean Myers, and I am a visual problem solver and a design thinker, and I'm delighted to have been able to have an opportunity to share this with you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you from QGLUE, Devika here, and hope you guys had a lovely webinar. Thank you again, Dean. It was lovely. And
Thank you, Dean.
thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.